I'm speaking to you today as a supporter of the new way of electing representatives in Ontario. I urge you on Election Day to vote for the new mixed proportional representation system. Dennis Raphael, I'm a professor of health policy and management at York University in Toronto. For the last 10 years, I've been doing research on what makes a population healthy and what makes a population basically have decent living conditions. Over the last few years, I've written 3 books. Social Determinants of Health is about living conditions. Staying Alive is a book which is about the healthcare system and public health in Canada. And more recently, I've written a book called Poverty and Policy in Canada. And the interesting conclusion I've come to is that one of the best ways that a nation seems to be able to take care of the health of its citizens is through the adoption of what's called proportional representation. And it would seem to be kind of complicated. Why would proportional representation be related to good health? The way that it operates is that in nations that have proportional representation, the will of the people is more accurately translated into who sits in legislatures. For example, in Canada, about 20% of people vote for the NDP, but the NDP, for example, only ends up with about 10% of the seats. In the case of a party like the Greens, which gets 6 to 8% of the vote, they don't end up with anything. It turns out that most nations in Europe have proportional representation. When 20% of the population votes for a particular party, they get 20% of the seats. And the way it plays out is when you have proportional representation, most people in most countries believe in equality, they believe in fair opportunity, and they believe in providing opportunities for most people to have decent lives. In Canada and in the United States, for example, the electoral system is set up in such a way that the majority of the people are not able to have their voice heard. So 30% of people may vote for one party that believes in giving people good living conditions. Another 25% may vote for another party that believes in that. But the party that receives 35 or 40% of the vote, sometimes they're called conservative, sometimes they're called right-wing, they aren't too particularly concerned in promoting good living conditions. So in these nations, these parties that are only able to get 35 to 40% of the vote are able to control the public policy agenda. And they do that because the electoral system we have allows them to gain control of the legislatures. In Canada, if we had proportional representation, what you would find is the majority will of Canadians would be able to be heard. And as it turns out, most Canadians believe in providing people with enough money that they don't have to live in poverty. Most Canadians believe in having a minimum wage that's high enough to allow people to be happy and healthy. And it turns out that most Canadians believe that we shouldn't have high levels of poverty in this country. Right now, the will of the majority is not able to be heard. Now, sometimes people say, why can't we be like Denmark or Norway or Sweden or Finland, where there's virtually no poor people, where health is very, very good, where crime rates are really low. And one of the reasons that these countries have been able to accomplish all of this is because of proportional representation. In these countries, the majority voice is able to be heard. And even when right-wing parties or conservative parties gain control or win the largest number of seats, they're never able to dominate the legislative agenda because in the end, there's still a majority of elected representatives that, in a way, oppose that agenda. So the long and the short of it is that currently in Canada, the conservative or right-wing voices that are opposed to issues of poverty reduction, decent living conditions, are able to control the public policy agenda. If we had proportional representation, the combined votes associated with most Canadians' views would be able to influence and, in a way, control public policy. When I'm asked how would we improve health, how would we reduce poverty in Canada, to me the single best way to do it would be to promote proportional representation. And in Ontario, we have the opportunity to do that. And in a way, if proportional representation was accepted, we would be able to turn public policy around on a dime, reducing poverty, improving quality of life, and improving the health of the population. So I hope that come election day, you make a point of voting for the new mixed proportional representation system. Thank you.